The Kremlin has put its condition for peace in the bluntest possible terms. Ukraine's allies should stop sending weapons. Then, according to Vladimir Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov, peace would come faster. Not Russian troops leaving Ukrainian land, not an end to missile strikes, not accountability for the war. Just one demand from Moscow: leave Ukraine with the fewer means to defend itself.
We would expect all countries to make such a decision. Then peace would come faster.
Peskov also said the European Union cannot act as a mediator in possible talks. He reasons the Europe supplies weapons to Ukraine and therefore, in Moscow's eyes, has become a party to the conflict. So the Kremlin is trying to define the rules of the table before talks even begin. Who is allowed in? Who is pushed out? And what kind of peace Ukraine is supposed to accept?
Right now, Europe is a party to the conflict on Ukraine's side. Do not forget that European weapons are directly hitting us, and it is impossible to ignore that. So, of course, in this status, Europe cannot claim any role as a mediator in any way.
While Russian men are being sent to die in trenches as a cannon fodder, the Kremlin is thinking about something else: how to extend the life of Putin and his aging inner circle. The Wall Street Journal reports that the Russian dictator is pouring billions of dollars into anti-aging research. His program includes 3D printing living tissue, growing human organs inside mini pigs, gene therapy, cryotherapy, and other experiments in eternal youth. The price tag is around $26 billion. The project is overseen by Putin's daughter and people from his closest circle. Russian scientists are already talking about plans to replace human organs by 2030, and then apparently inside Putin himself.
When Vladimir Putin was captured by a hot mic telling Xi Jinping that humans could achieve immortality by replacing their organs, some dismissed the exchange as eccentric small talk between aging autocrats. In fact, during the conversation at a Beijing military parade last September, Putin appeared to be describing a Kremlin-backed longevity initiative that has become one of Russia's flagship scientific projects.
A Russian drone entered Romanian airspace during another overnight attack on Ukraine and crashed into a 10-story apartment building in Galaya, near the Ukrainian border. Several people were injured, and the incident immediately raised questions about why a NATO member state was unable to stop the drone before impact. Romania's military says the answer comes down to both legal restrictions and time.
The first limitation we have is a legal one. We cannot fire in a way that would cause a projectile to enter the airspace of a neighboring country. In addition, engaging an aerial target requires time. The target has to be detected, classified, and then engaged. The 4 minutes we had available were extremely short. We have ground-based air defense systems that were designed and built before 2023. Before this drone war began. Romania is constantly working to improve these systems. 2 such systems are planned under the SAFE program.
And although this was not a deliberate attack against Romania, officials say Russia's war against Ukraine is having an increasing impact on the security of NATO's entire eastern flank.
Romanians should understand that Russia is a threat to the security of countries in this region. The war Russia is waging against Ukraine affects all countries on NATO's eastern flank and beyond. As I said earlier, this was not an attack by Russia against Romania, but we must understand that similar incidents have happened before, and they can happen again.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha said Ukraine is ready to help its partners defend their skies against Russian drones and share the experience it has gained from more than 4 years of fighting Russian aerial attacks. Russia is finding it increasingly difficult to recruit new people for the war. The Institute for the Study of War says the Kremlin's contract recruitment campaign is showing signs of a strain. Battlefield losses remain high. Fewer Russians are willing to sign military contracts, and there may already be discussions inside the Kremlin about another round of mobilization. Moscow continues to raise signing bonuses, right of debts for new recruits, and expand recruitment efforts to new groups of the population. But the problem is no longer just how many people Russia can recruit. The question is whether it can get those people to the front and hold its positions under constant Ukrainian pressure.
The lack of significant battlefield successes, mounting war sacrifices, and casualty rates are contributing to the domestic Russian perception that the war in Ukraine is not going well for Russia. That perception is already hindering Russian contract recruitment. Any involuntary mobilization campaign would likely be significantly more unpopular among the Russian population now than it might have been previously. Ukrainian forces have created a deep zone of drone activity from the intermediate range to the front line. It is unclear that additional reserve mobilization would materially improve Russian forces' battlefield performance unless Russian forces can first counter Ukrainian drone operations.
They respond positively to Ukraine's request for more air defense missiles. He said this is not just about military support, but about Europe will never be a neutral mediator between Russia and Ukraine. That message came from EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas after talks with European foreign ministers in Cyprus. European officials say Moscow has shown no genuine interest in peace, and that supporting Ukraine is not only about helping a partner under attack, but also about protecting Europe's own security.
The dynamics of the war are shifting in Ukraine's favor. Russia is on the back foot militarily, economically, but also diplomatically. But as the latest strikes on Kyiv have shown, Russia still shows no genuine interest in peace, which was also the clear view of the ministers today. Moscow's direct threat to kill foreign diplomats in Kyiv is a public announcement of a war crime. Today, we also discussed our own European core security interests regarding Russia. It is good that ministers had the chance to reflect, and we had really thorough discussions on what concessions Europe should ask from Moscow and what our red lines are. And one thing is very clear. Europe will never be a neutral mediator between Russia and Ukraine, because we are on Ukraine's side and we are defending our own core security interests.
Russia launched another large-scale drone attack on Odessa overnight. According to regional authorities, Ukrainian air defenses shot down most of the drones, but the attack still caused significant damage. Around 4,000 residents in southern parts of the city were left without electricity. Officials say there were no casualties. The attack also reached the Black Sea. Russian drones struck 3 commercial vessels operating along Ukraine's maritime corridor. Newly released images show damage to a Turkish-operated dry cargo ship, highlighting the continuing risks to civilian shipping despite Ukraine's efforts to keep maritime trade moving during the war. The United States has called Russia's use of the Oreshnik missile against Ukraine a barbaric escalation. Speaking at the UN Security Council, US representative reminded delegates that recent attacks on Kyiv killed civilians, injured more than 100 people, and damaged residential buildings, museums, and public transport infrastructure, the very places that should be part of everyday city life, not targets for Russian missiles. Washington said deliberate attacks on civilians are obscene and unacceptable. The United States also warned Moscow against launching further systematic strikes on Kyiv, saying such attacks would only lead to more deaths, more destruction, and even deeper escalation of the Russia's war.
Deliberate attacks against civilians are obscene and unacceptable. The United States extends its deepest sympathies to all those affected. We caution Russia not to mount so-called systematic strikes against Kyiv, which risk further civilian casualties and setting back the prospect of peace. We note, too, with serious concern, Russia's apparent disregard for the protections afforded to diplomatic facilities and personnel under international law. We remind Russia, in clear terms, of its legal obligations, and we add, diplomacy and negotiation are the only path forward towards lasting peace. Threats and incendiary rhetoric are clearly not part of that path. Colleagues, the Russia-Ukraine war can only end with a negotiated settlement. The United States once again calls for an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire as a step towards a durable, negotiated end to the war. The alternative is escalating violence that will spiral out of control. That is unacceptable. The war must stop. The United States calls on the Russian Federation to cease, and the international community, as the international community, calls for this system to break out of this cycle. We call for de-escalation, and we continue calls for both parties to negotiate in good faith to end this war. As Secretary Rubio said earlier this week, the United States stands prepared to play a constructive role as soon as any opportunity and real commitment from both parties presents itself. We are ready to do whatever is possible to stop the death and destruction.
On the night of 23rd and 24th of May, the armed forces of the Russian Federation launched a massive strike across Ukraine, reportedly deploying as many as 90 long-range missiles and 600 drones. Among the weapons used was the so-called Oreshnik intermediate-range ballistic missile, which targeted the city of Bila Tserkva in central Ukraine.
That's all for now. Thank you for watching.